Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to another IG Live with Giant Step. And I'm very happy to have this week a very special guest. It's Doug Herzog. And I'm waiting for him to join. And I see he has joined. Excellent. Just bringing him in now. There we go.
Hey,
Hi, Doug. Can you?
I can hear you. I can see you. How are you, Mo?
I'm good. I'm actually going to put my earbuds in because I
All right.
want to make sure it sounds good. We've got a bunch of people joining.
Awesome.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah. All good. All good. Can you
Great.
hear me?
Perfect. Yep. Excellent.
All right.
Excellent. So, for those who don't know, Doug is a television executive. He's the former president of Viacom Music and Entertainment, where he oversaw Comedy Central, MTV, VH1, Spike, TVLand and Logo. And under your stewardship at Viacom, it became the home of like classic shows like The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, Colbert Report, South Park, The Real World, the UFC, Key and Peele, Inside Amy Schumer, and that's only to name a few. And besides all the great stuff you did when you were president, you have a long history, I would say, in music and culture, and you're very much a culture vulture as well. So I really want to sort of like, as we only have an hour, get into just you as a person in your career. And then I also want to end with some sort of like thoughts and insights on sort of where television is going with sort of within this digital age, and especially how things have shifted in the last 2 years so quickly and with COVID and everything. So as always, I start at the beginning. And I want to sort of get into the early life, your early life, Doug. And you grew up in Paterson, is that correct?
Paterson, New Jersey. So yeah. So about 15, 20 minutes out of New York City, northern New Jersey, Sopranos country for anybody who might not be familiar with that part of the world.
And
And
Paterson's known as Silk City, right?
Well, yeah, so it was known as Silk City. Early on, it was built around the Great Falls of Patterson, which, sort of fueled industry there, and it became a big silk center. That was all mostly gone by, certainly by World War II, long gone actually by World War II. And Patterson, which is kind of like a mini Newark, sort of fell into steep decline. And that certainly had started when I started going to school in the 60s. A lot of racial tension, and that was the world then. Patterson was not the most notable place that was happening, but it was certainly happening there. And but it was interesting. It was a great place to grow up. I grew up in a very diverse, pretty diverse neighborhood, and went to diverse public schools for a long time. And I really have warm, fond feelings for Patterson.
It has a lot for a small town. I think it has quite a few sort of like very important places within culture as well. Before we get into that, I think it's got the second largest Muslim population in the United
Well,
States, which is
yes,
yeah,
it does now. Yeah,
yeah,
my temple is my old temple is now mosque.
right,
But it was the home of Allen Ginsberg,
right. And
most
he wrote
famous
about it in
for
the Howl. He wrote about it in
he
the
wrote
Howl.
about it in the Howl. Carlos Williams, of course, wrote about it. It
Kerouac
was
on
the
the road.
Kerouac's on the Road starts in Patterson. It was the home of Lou Costello. It was, infamously named in Hurricane, the Bob Dylan
Yeah,
song.
on
Uh,
Desire. Yeah,
Reuben Hurricane Carter had
yeah.
dinner at my house one night. That's another
Oh
story
wow.
for another day.
Oh, well, why
And
didn't you could tell that quickly. You could tell that quickly.
Well, my mother, who I don't know if you ever met her, my
Of
mom,
course I
but
met your mom. Yeah, yeah,
she was she was somebody you didn't forget.
yeah.
It certainly if you met her. to make a long story short, she was very involved in what was going on in Paterson. She was born and raised there. Became very involved in the civil rights movement there and civic activities and doing a lot for the community and doing all sorts of things. And when Reuben was on trial in the 70s, of course, my mother, who made it her business to know everybody, somehow befriended the legal team. And sure enough, in the middle of the trial, he comes to my house for dinner one night
Wow.
with his legal team, and it was not unusual for our house, as my father commented years later. But my dad was gone with him. My folks were divorced. But yeah, so I don't have it anymore. I used to have a signed copy of his book, but
Wow.
I know I have that.
And Lean on Me was the movie.
Yeah, Lean on Me was Principal Joe Clark. So that if you've ever seen that movie, you get a little bit of a sense of where Paterson was going and what it was like. And by that time, my older sisters actually graduated Eastside High School, which is where that. One didn't graduate. She went to private school in her senior year because at one point my parents pulled us all to public school because they had gotten so bad. My second oldest sister actually went back to Eastside and graduated there. My mom would not let me go back by the time I was ready. Joe Clark, I graduated high school in '77. Joe Clark was there in the early '80s, so he was right after me. But that's kind of Eastside High School. Was a tough place.
Yeah, and and there's some famous rappers from Paterson. I'm sorry we're talking so much, but
Fetty Wap.
Fetty Wap. Yeah. Just
He's
Blaze.
Yeah. So there's a couple of semi-notable basketball players, a couple of semi-notable rappers.
The Pizzarellis.
Yeah, of course. Well, Bucky
and John.
So yeah, my mom grew up going to see Bucky play. I used to go see Bucky play as a kid when I first started getting into jazz, and his son John was born there. I never met John. I actually went to the Blue Note probably 5-6 years ago, just before he passed, and went upstairs to where went and introduced myself. We talked Paterson for a little while, and he was lovely and great.
That's amazing. So you growing up, when did you first start discovering a love for music?
I guess always. My sisters love music. I was one of those guys with older sisters who would turn you on to records and music. My mom loved music. In those days it was the radio and the record player, and that's what you did. We had a jukebox actually in our basement, so we'd go downtown and to the record store and buy 45s. And my sisters were, my older sister Debbie was was big into music, and would give me her extra copies of the Rolling Stones or Bob Dylan or whatever she had, and my mom was really into music. My mom was super into sort of R&B and soul music, so we listened to a lot of Motown, a lot of Stax in my house, a lot of Aretha. My mom also loved Engelbert Humperdinch and Tom Jones and that kind of stuff, but she had some pretty cool taste, and took me. The first concert I went to was, but the first real rock concert I went to was the worst rock concert I ever saw. It was a Jethro Tull concert at a Passion Play at Madison Square Garden. And shortly thereafter that, my mom took me to see Al Green because she was a big Al Green fan. We saw Al Green at Lincoln Center at Avery Fisher Hall, and we went out to the Nanuet Theater Go-Round, which if anybody's from the metropolitan area, you might remember, to see Ray Charles and Gladys Knight and the Pips.
Wow.
And then most importantly, when I was in high school, again, long story, my mom got involved with this event that was taking place in Jamaica, and doing some travel for the act. So we ended up at this big benefit concert in Kingston National Stadium in October of 1975. And I saw Stevie Wonder, Bob Marley and the Wailers, and Third World. I sat next to Dick
Jamaica.
In Kingston, Jamaica, in the National Stadium, in the front row. I was sitting next to Dick Gregory. I was 16 years old, and it changed everything. Literally game changer. Nothing was the same after that. I became, I was entranced by Bob Marley, who I kind of had heard of before that, Eric Clapton had the hit with
I Shot the Sheriff.
I Shot the Sheriff, of course. And so I
Yeah.
you know, yeah, I Shot the Sheriff. I sort of heard a little bit, you know, it was in there, but I didn't really know what reggae was or who Bob Marley was. And and I picked up a copy of Natty Dread, which was his current album at the Kingston airport on my way to town. And I've been obsessed ever since. So.
Do you still have the copy?
You know, it's funny you ask. So because I was a novice and in college, I had a Jamaican pressing, which is probably now worth something.
Right.
I had a Tough Gong Jamaican pressing. And when I was in college, those pressings were so horrible that I remember in college, I switched it out for the College Island Records copy, which was a much better pressing. And so I still have the cover, but I don't have that original copy. And I was an idiot. What can I tell you?
Right. Wow, that's pretty amazing. I mean, to be in Kingston, Jamaica, 1975, Stevie Wonder, Bob Marley, and Third World.
By the way, it was the last time that the original Wailers performed together, which of course was lost on me at the time because I had no idea who Peter Tosh or Buddy Wailer was. But it was literally the last time they ever performed live together. And I do specifically remember Peter because he sang "Legalize It." And of course, I was 16 years old, and everybody, you know, and I'm in Jamaica, and I'm kind of, you know, experimenting with marijuana myself. And I just remember, I remember standing next to my mother, and this guy singing "Legalize," and I'm like, this is pretty cool.
Wow, that's an amazing moment.
Yeah.
So then you became sort of obsessed with reggae music, obviously. From there.
Well, music in general, and reggae specifically for sure. But I loved rock and I loved R&B and funk. I'm a big funk guy, and the '70s, you know, funk and jazz funk, and loved a lot of rock bands I love. But I was more of a, I for whatever reason, I just sort of gravitated a little bit more to black music.
Mm-hmm. And so when you left high school, you went to college. You went up to Boston, right? You
went to Emerson College in Boston. Yeah, small school up there. Yeah, still I'm a trustee of the school there. Very devoted to that place, and was a great experience for me. And Boston was a great place to be, and met my wife there, and a lot of great friends. And yeah.
And you were involved in radio when you went up there.
I started the reggae show. It was called Strictly Rockers, and it ran on. I got a opportunity to do it, weekends, and it became so popular that in my senior year, they switched it to daily, so it ran from 4 to 7 every night in Boston for about 30 years. It was only a couple of years ago when the station went from a student-run station to a different format where they took it off the air. But it was a very, very popular mainstay show in Boston. In fact, I've just gotten involved on Facebook with a couple of Facebook groups that are devoted to it, which is pretty fun.
Wow, that's amazing. So after what did you study in college?
TV, radio, film, actually. I went to, if you read my high school yearbook, says my career goal was film director, and I probably thought I was going to be Woody Allen when it was cool to be Woody Allen, or Robert Altman or something like that. And I went off to college, but I loved TV. I was obsessed with TV. I was obsessed with movies. I was obsessed with music, and all of it seemed like something I might. I found out pretty quickly that film moved too fast, too slow. I could barely load the camera. The TV thing moved a lot faster. I got very involved with TV and the radio station at Emerson. So I sort of felt like I wanted to do one of those. I couldn't have told you what I wanted to do, but I was thinking about maybe I'll go for a record company, or and good for me. I always tell people when I went to Emerson, the day I went to Emerson in September of 1977, none of the places I subsequently worked at existed then.
Interesting.
And I left college, and it'll be 40 years ago. It's 40 years ago this month. It was the dawn of cable television, and so I was very much came out of school at kind of a great time. There was this new business opening up, and MTV, quite frankly, sounded like my wet dream, music and television. And I very much wanted to work at MTV. I did not get a job there right away. It took me a couple of years to crack that. But I finally was able to get it.
Where did you go? Where did you end up first? Where was your first
I was
Sure.
at the Cable News Network in their Los Angeles bureau the day they launched in June of. Oh, I was there as an intern in June of 1980, and then I had one more semester of school, and I went back out to Los Angeles, and I worked for the Cable News Network, the fledgling Cable News Network. Nobody had cable. Nobody knew who Ted Turner was. People thought a 24-hour news channel was a really dumb idea.
Right, right.
And there were and the place was built on a bunch of unhirable news veterans, drug addicts, alcoholics, people who said things in the office they shouldn't have, people from like newspapers and local news and news radio, and a bunch of kids, because we were cheap. And there I was.
And was it like the Wild West? Did it?
It was
the
the Wild West. First of all, we produced a nightly quote celebrity talk show from an office building that's still here at the corner of Sunset and Vine every night at 10 o'clock LA time, with two cameras that were used, two news cameras, and just shooting out the window on the 17th floor of an office building, and trying to convince people to come to Hollywood at 10 o'clock at night. So it was a D-list celebrity talk show. But it was like graduate school, and I learned everything, and I met amazing people and people I've known, my whole career, including people like Tom Hanks or, these were, he was on Bosom Buddies then. He'd come up to the show all the time. It turned out to be like, graduate school. Everybody in Atlanta, which is where CNN is based to this day, it was 1 a.m. in the morning there. There was nobody up. So there was a bunch of 25-year-old kids in charge of this little TV show. There were like 4 of us. And, it felt like sort of like an extension of college, because there was a bunch of guys I went to college with, and graduate school. And I did that for about, 3 years. And then they shut that down, and they moved me over to hard news, which is not something I knew quickly that I was not cut out for news. And I got a job kind of doing the same thing, booking music stories at Entertainment Tonight. And I did that for a year. That was like 83, and I booked
and that
the
was
first
still in Hollywood.
national.
That was still in
Hollywood. I booked the first. Booked the first national TV interview for Bruce Springsteen, and I scooped MTV. I beat him by a week, and so I came to the attention of the great MTV, which this is 1984 now, and they are just raging. They're the biggest thing in the world, and as I like to say,
so they've been around obscurity. Since
81.
Like 81. August the 1st,
yeah.
Right. August the 1st.
Exactly.
Right?
Coming up on 40 years for them. So they were around, so John Sykes, 12, yeah. So John Sykes plucked me from obscurity, and I moved to New York to start the news department at MTV.
Ah. So you were doing the news, and who was Kurt Loder the presenter then, or was there this?
No. We hired Kurt much later. When I got to MTV, there were a couple of people there who were basically, sort of rewriting Billboard articles for the VJs to read. And then we sort of built out a department and started shooting stories, and, quickly realized that the biggest rock stars like the Springsteens and the Bonos and the Princes and the Madonnas, they didn't want to talk to the VJs because they thought they were sort of lightweights. And so this woman, Linda Cordina, who was a fellow Emersonian and was working for me in the news department, said we should go see if we can get Kurt Loder, and we did, and then Kurt joined, and that sort of changed everything, certainly for MTV News.
Right. And MTV, as you said, when you joined, they were the biggest thing.
It was the center of the the center of the universe. Yeah, I tell my kids, I go, it's hard to wrap your head around it, because nothing like that exists today, and I don't know that anything could ever could. But it was like Spotify, Twitter, YouTube, Snapchat, all rolled into one. And it's where everything happened. And if you weren't watching MTV, you didn't know what was going on. If you were a young person.
I think the model was brilliant, because basically they got the record companies to pay to create all the content, and probably had to pay them to play the content as well. And and people were begging them, but and the record companies would spend more money because everyone was fighting to plussing up their videos. So it was in the early days, it was a brilliant model. Genius. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so it was, they didn't pay us to play, but they did pay to make the videos. we
Right.
ultimately, for a long time we got them for free, and then we started paying for them as the record companies were like, hey, what's going on here? And then, what happened was shortly after I got there, so I like to say I got there in 1984, which I think was the absolute, apex of the music video era. You're talking, this is Born in the USA, Purple Rain, Madonna, and Thriller / The Victory Tour. That's
Right.
that's what I walked into.
That's it. Right.
And shortly thereafter that, sort of the novelty of just watching videos wore off. We were growing in distribution, so we started to get into more homes. We were being rated by Nielsen, and now we're paying a lot of attention to ratings and how we sell advertising. And we saw, viewership going like this because maybe you don't like the Culture Club video that just came after the Cyndi Lauper video that came after the Duran Duran video, so you're switching the channel.
Then they leave.
And so somebody, the Bob Pittman, who was running MTV at that time, said, we're going to make shows to keep people around longer, which was a very controversial thing for MTV at the time. And it was all about engagement, which of course is not what we called it, but that game hasn't changed. It was about keeping people engaged for longer periods of time with MTV. So I was the guy that was charged with making the shows. And from the beginning, Bob had 3 shows in mind. He wanted to do a game show, a dance show, and a news show. So We Can Rock with Kurt Loder, Club MTV with Julie Brown, and
Downtown Julie Brown,
and the infamous game show Remote Control with Ken Ober and Colin Quinn. And like I said, it was pretty controversial. To this day, there are people who walk around going, why doesn't MTV play music anymore? I go, they haven't played music since 1985. Like, where you been?
I mean, I just remember when I would come to the States before MTV came to Europe, that I would just sit and watch it all day waiting for a certain video. And people, because, again, now content is at our fingertips. You want to see a video, you can go to YouTube, you can just Google it, but back then you had to wait.
And then, you're a little younger than me. In my day, I tell people, we'd listen to the radio all day and wait for our favorite record to come on. And if we liked it and we wanted to hear it again, either waited for it or you got in the car and drove to Sam Goody's.
Yeah, or you just try to record it,
or you just try to record it. Yeah, exactly.
MTV was obviously a huge phenomenon, but there also was some controversy, and although that was sort of before you were there, I do want to talk a little bit about sort of like they got a lot of criticism for not really supporting Black artists. Although I will say that the Specials were one of the first artists they did play on MTV, right?
Yeah, maybe probably in the dead of the night. Look, MTV, my take was always, the people that were running MTV, I was one of the first sort of like TV people to come. So a lot of the people who were in senior management were from radio, were from record companies or talent agencies. And the guys who were programming it were kind of radio. Bob Pitt was radio guy. Still is. He runs iHeart. And it was sort of programmed like an AOR station. And like AOR, they did hardly played any black music. So that was really what it was about. Music. It wasn't. I mean, if you could draw any analogies you want, but it was sort of AOR / new wave formatted. And, they, like a lot of people who came from that type of programming, they were afraid to break the mold and afraid, like, oh my God, we can't play this. This is not in the, and so they just didn't play a lot of black music. And then Michael Jackson, basically kicked the door down. And not only that, but that led to, then ironically, I think MTV went and did, Yo MTV Raps later on, which, I think changed the face of not only black music, but music in general and the music landscape in general. And hip hop would have happened without MTV, but MTV was the rocket ship that it attached itself to in the beginning. And when the two met, it just exploded.
Yeah, I think MTV took hip hop to the suburbs.
MTV was literally, it was like shooting heroin into a vein, into, literally, I mean, it was going to get there anyway,
Yeah.
but it was like a straight shot,
Yeah. Yeah.
into these suburban neighborhoods where, like I said, hip hop was going to succeed either way, but MTV was jet fuel.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a juggernaut that got them there. So one of the other interesting things with the sort of the rise of MTV was just the role of music directors, video directors. I mean, if you think about some of the video directors who then went on to have extremely successful film careers, a lot of them got their start.
David Fincher.
Yeah,
David Fincher.
One,
I mean, there's an endless list.
Michel Gondry, Spike Jonze. I mean, Jonathan Glazer.
Yeah, I mean, there's dozens. Yeah, Mark Pellington. I mean, there's.
Yeah.
At the time, the music videos were looked down upon to a certain degree, and everybody was, oh, they're ruining, the attention span of America, and it's all too fast and quick cuts and this and that. But the best videos were coming from some of these great directors who were taking enormous chances and being experimental and trying things and had real vision. And yeah, that was quickly and later adapted by not only feature films but television as well. And I think there are some really amazing. There's a lot of crap, but there are some amazing music videos that have stood the test of time.
Yeah, absolutely, and changed the way filmmaking was made as well in many ways, because
no question about it.
Yeah, they adapted that. And we talked a little bit about sort of like the reality programming. I'd like to talk a little bit more about it because, again, I mean, The Real World, Road Rules, MTV. I mean, again, yeah. Go ahead.
The Real World came about. We were trying to do a young adults. We had tried it. It was like we did a game show, we did a dance show, we did a news show. We were putting our MTV spin on every conceivable genre, or as we used to say back then, which sounds so horrible now, like, yeah, it's a game show, but it's got a rock and roll attitude. So we decided we wanted to do a young adult soap opera. Like a 5-day-a-week soap opera, like your grandma watches, like One Life to Live. And we developed it. It was going to be called St. Mark's Place. It's going to be all these young people on the Lower East Side. We were going to do it 5 days a week. And because, again, we were a little bit of idiots, we're well into this process, and we had hired this woman, Mary Ellis Bunham, who had produced soaps for NBC for many years, to help us develop it and guide us through. It dawned on us one day, it's like, oh my God, we can't really afford this. Like, if we have to do it every day, like we can't afford to do it every day. And we just shut the whole thing down and sent Mary Ellis away, and that was that. And then she came back a couple of months later with a gentleman named John Bunham, and they had a company called Bunham Murray, and they said, we think we have your soap opera thing solved. Okay, what's that? And they basically pitched us The Real World, which we said yes to in the room. And we let them, we made a pilot. We actually rented a loft downtown and cast, the 7 kids, including a couple that ended up in the first season. And we shot over the Thanksgiving Day weekend, like a 4-day weekend, on handy cams, video cams, like the kind of stuff, your dad was probably doing home movies on. And they edited up those 4 days into about 22 minutes. And we were like, oh my God, this is a TV show. Yes. And it took off literally immediately. And, the big aha moment around that was that the audience wanted to see themselves. And as much as they wanted to see rock stars, they really were just more interested maybe in seeing themselves, which I think gets us to, Instagram selfies.
Yeah.
The one of the tip-offs was when we used to go to spring break, and we'd bring down all these bands and these rock stars, these celebrities, and do these great things and these contests and games and concerts. But when we turned the cameras just on the kids themselves, they used to just go batshit. And it was like, oh man, they really just want to see themselves. And so that all kind of came together with The Real World. And the great thing, everything at MTV, a lot of things at MTV in those days were not built to last because we never wanted to grow old with the audience. So we wanted to, sorry, my phone here. We wanted to, we were cycling in a new audience all the time and constantly evolve. And the reason the Real World is still around to this day, 25 plus years later, is because it reinvents itself every season, right? You're not growing old with characters that are 25 years old. It's a new set of characters every year, and it's kind of a brilliant concept, and that's why it's still here today. And they do a great job.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what about some of the other? I mean, there was like the Spring Break, the Road Rules.
Road Rules came out of the Real World, which was like, okay, how do we turn that on its head? Oh, we take them out on the road. And it really came out of a saying we used to have in the office, which was there were road rules, what stays on the road lays on the road kind of thing. Or what lays on the road stays on the road, I think is the way it went. And so the term road rules was something we used to use around the office in those days. And we just, Joe Davola, who, my good friend and famous Seinfeld character, just took the Real World concept, turned it on its head, and they went that way. Things like Spring Break, and we started, before we actually started doing this original programming, one of our first instincts was just to attach ourselves to things that we thought the audience was interested in. So we'd go to the Super Bowl, we'd go to Spring Break, we'd go to Mardi Gras, and that's how sort of, just to kind of be out there where the audience was and be seen and have the audience touch us and vice versa. And all that stuff worked out really well.
And then Beavis and Butthead.
Beavis and Butthead, that was found by a guy named Abby Turcouli, who found it at a film festival. And, we had the idea like, oh, this is really funny. What do we do with it? What if they made fun of videos? Because that's sort of a little bit what their thing was. I'll never forget, we went and we took it to a focus group. And we showed a group of teenage boys, Beavis and Butthead, a focus group. And what I remember is when the focus group was over, they all asked if they could buy the tape. And we thought, oh man, we may have something here. That's a good sign. That's a good sign. Yeah. That is a very good sign.
And somebody who you worked with in a lot in the future was Jon Stewart. Didn't he have a show on MTV as well?
Well, Jon, we first hired Jon to do a crazy little show called You Wrote It, You Watch It, where people would send in letters for advice, and we would then make sketches out of them, including the fresh out of NYU members of the state. And Jon was the host. It was short-lived, but we really fell in love with Jon, and then we gave him his own talk show. And he did that for about a year or so. And again, we couldn't really afford to do it. So we turned him over to Paramount, and they put it into syndication, where it did not succeed. He did that for a little bit. And then, a couple of years later, when I got to Comedy Central, he became the second host of The Daily Show.
So that's a good segue to Comedy Central. So when did you land at Comedy Central?
So I got to MTV in '84, and in '95, Comedy Central was interestingly about the same age MTV was when I went there. So 3-4 years in, kind of hadn't quite figured it out yet, although MTV had. And half owned by MTV, half owned by HBO. And I was sort of like the number 2 guy at MTV behind Judy McGrath, my great friend, who led MTV for many, many, many years. I was a big fan of comedy, and I kind of wanted to see if I could run one of these things myself. And so I took the job running Comedy Central in the summer of '95, and Bill Maher was there at the time doing Politically Incorrect. And I literally had been on the job for about 2 weeks when I was notified Bill would be leaving at the end of his contract. A year later, he'd already signed with ABC, and thank you very much, but we'll work out our contract and see you later. So I had to replace Politically Incorrect. And I had this idea for, so Comedy Central outside of Bill Maher was just nothing but bad reruns, including Benny Hill.
That's
bad. I was like, we need to give, that's bad. I was like, we need to give people a reason to come every day, to Comedy Central, because if you watch it on Monday, it's the same on Tuesday. So we need to be topical and current. And I sort of landed on this idea of like, what if you took Weekend Update, and kind of try to do that every day. And that was sort of like the jumping off point, like Weekend Update every day, part Weekend Update, part Howard Stern, part news show, part, I used to reference the Today, I'll be part Today Show, part Howard Stern, but something you do every day. And we hired a great women named Madeline Smithberg. Oh my God, and Liz, I'm spacing on Liz's last name, Liz Winstead, who helped us develop the show. And we hired a guy named Craig Kilborn off of ESPN. And so he had more of a snarky frat boy kind of approach. But the Daily Show kind of hit it pretty quick and pretty good. And we were building, and then Craig jumped to CBS, and we had to replace Craig. And I honestly didn't think Jon Stewart was going to be interested. He was sort of the heir apparent to Letterman in those days. And I was like, he's not coming here to Comedy Central to replace Craig Kilborn. And somebody said, you should talk to him. He might do it, or he's interested. And I went and had lunch with him, and he said yes over lunch, and that was that. And, the rest is, literally television history. Jon, saw something in the Daily Show I think the rest of us did not see, and had a vision for it and a point of view. And, he created the template for the modern day, or the Daily Show Mach 2, which exists to this day with Trevor Noah. I'm proud to say, as long as Trevor Noah is in the seat, I can proudly say I've hired every host of the Daily Show. So
you hired Trevor Noah as well.
I hired Trevor as well, yeah.
Because I thought that was a very brave and visionary hire, because Trevor was, first of all, taking over from Jon Stewart, which was kind of a
big shoes to fill.
Poison chalice. I mean, you can't
absolutely
really, and instead of going with a name, you went with.
Well, we looked at those two.
Right.
We looked at those two. Look, it was a difficult decision here, and the truth is there were some people who wanted to do it who we didn't want. There were some people we wanted who didn't want to do it. And the truth is, not everybody can do this. It is so much harder than it looks. And from the minute Jon decided he was going to leave and we started to think about how to replace him, Trevor was in the back of my mind. Like, I was like, he's super young, he's super untested, but he seemed to have the raw skills. And we also were very conscious, like we wanted a different kind of, we wanted to shake it up a little bit. So Trevor brought a lot to the table in that regard, including his skills, but also his worldview. And it all worked out, and it worked out for him, and he's doing a great job.
He's awesome. And another big success was South Park. Can you talk a little about the sort of like the evolution of that and how that?
Well, that South Park. Matt and Trey were out here, just out of college, kind of a couple of years, and they're working over at Fox for a guy named Brian Graydon, helping them develop shows. And they had done a short in college called The Spirit of Christmas, which a lot of people know as Jesus versus Santa, very rudimentary. And Brian had seen it and really liked it, and he asked them if they could sort of do a version of that. For him, he wanted to send it out as a video Christmas card on VHS. This is 1996. So he sent it to all his friends. Everybody freaked out when they saw it. And then people started making their own copies to send to their friends. And it was viral before there was viral. And a woman who worked for me in Comedy Central in our LA office named Debbie Liebling, also an ex-MTV person, brought it to my attention. She said, I want to show you something. She showed it to me. I was like, oh my God, that's the funniest thing I've ever seen. Could I watch it again? And she showed me again. And then I said, I don't think we can do that, which turned out not to be true because we did do that and more. I said, but we need to be in business with these guys. And then the other company that was most interested, ironically, was MTV. And I talked them out of going to MTV. I said, look, if you go to MTV, look, I know MTV. I've been there. They're targeting teenagers, and you're going to have a lot of problems doing what you want to do with them and their advertisers and their standards department. I go, we're targeting adults. I'll let you do whatever you want. And we did. So that was that. And as I say, I still see those guys, and I always say to them, I go, look, if I'd known you were going to be this successful and run for 25 plus years, I'd have never left Comedy Central. So.
Yeah, and
because I did leave and then come back later.
Right, and other incredible shows and careers that you helped with, like the Colbert Report, Stephen Colbert.
Well, yeah, I mean, Stephen actually had a show on Comedy Central when I got there. He was part of a sketch troupe with Amy Sedaris and a few other folks. It was called Exit 57, which I unceremoniously canceled, and then gave him a job writing promos because he had just had a baby, put him in a cubicle, and then he went on to do Strangers with Candy with that same troupe, which was, kind of an underground hit. By the way, he then became one of the first correspondents on the Daily Show. He was on the Craig Kilborn Daily Show. He was there from the beginning. And by the time Jon got there, Stephen had really, kind of perfected his craft, and he and Jon became very close. And, they pitched this show. And I honestly have to say, I remember watching, if you go watch the first night of the Colbert Report, which is an incredible thing because he's in character, right? Which is so hard. That show came out the first night completely baked. I mean, it was ready to go, including they used the phrase truthiness, which I thought came much later, which was night one. But look for it. I mean, I think it's on YouTube or maybe it's on Paramount Plus or something. But that show came out fully formed, and that's a tribute to Stephen and to Jon. And some of the producers of that show. And yeah, it was a 1-2 punch, it was like, as you say, it was like having Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle, on the same team every night. And it was pretty incredible.
Yeah. And we also can't, leave the Comedy Central canon without talking about the Chappelle Show.
Of course.
Which to this day still is, I mean,
still resonates.
I can watch that on repeat constantly, and I still kill myself laughing. So,
well, Dave, I had left Comedy Central in '99, and I came back in 2004. When I returned in 2004, Dave had just finished season 2 of his amazing first 2 seasons. He did not have a deal for season 3. So my first job was to back up the truck and get Dave Chappelle to re-sign and continue doing the Chappelle Show, which I did. I'm the guy who gave him the, quote, $50 million deal, only to have Dave leave the show and never to return. So it was a crazy time, and it was, unfortunate. And Dave has obviously come full circle. And is now really, I think, doing exactly what he should be doing, which is stand up, which, he doesn't have to worry about a network or standards or advertisers or hitting, deadlines and he's brilliant. I mean, Dave's the heavyweight champion. He is one of the, first of all, that show as a sketch show is also brilliant. And there's no question Dave can succeed at many things, but there's also no question that I think is at his core, he's a stand up and he's one of the world's very best, one of the great voices, and a heavyweight.
And also, I think, similar to how MTV was responsible for sort of bringing rap to the suburbs, I think that Comedy Central was probably responsible for bringing that sort of like urban humor and culture to the suburbs, which could have also been the undoing, because I think he realized they're not supposed to be laughing at this because we're laughing at them. So it's I think that freaked him out a little bit.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, that's a whole other subject, about what sent him off set and away from that for a long time. But it got very big very fast, right? And then he would, he was trying to, I think he got a little sort of unnerved by, are people laughing with me or laughing at me?
Yeah.
And then he would just go out on tour and everybody would just want to do Rick James. And it's just one of those things that, that kind of success, which was, I've never seen anything take off like that. That kind of fame, that kind of impact, that will fuck with you. I don't care who you are.
Absolutely.
So yeah. And like I said, unfortunately, we did not really get many more episodes after that. I think like 2.5, but Dave recently got paid, so good for Dave. And you know, I couldn't be a bigger fan, and it all seems like a long time ago now.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the other thing I want to talk about with Comedy Central was the roast, celebrity roast, which I think also created some real sort of classic comedy as well over the
Well,
years.
I grew up watching the Dean Martin roasts. You know, I love those. By the way, if you ever, they air right now on Amazon, and you know, I mean, they're hard to watch actually. You know, in terms of what was seen as acceptable humor in those days versus now. But roasts are tricky. And then I used to go to the Friars Club roasts in New York, which were just filthy, 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 filthy. And when I got to Comedy Central, at MTV, we had great success with events, right? The Video Music Awards, the Movie Awards, Spring Break, right? So I was like, oh my God, like what's a comedy event? What does that mean? I was like, let's do a roast. So anyway, so we went out and actually partnered with the Friars Club on the first couple, and we got into the roast business, and ended up roasting the 45th president of the United States, as it turned out, amongst other luminaries. But always a crazy night, and I'll be curious to see what happens with the roast going forward. You know, we're the world continues to evolve and change, and cancel culture has become a thing that I think people in the comedy world are very conscious of. Yeah. And I'll be curious to see where the roast goes from here.
Well, I think that's a really good segue into the next part of our talk, and that is really the future of television in the digital and streaming world, which is also post-COVID. So much has changed. So, like when you first got into television entertainment, you went into cable, which was the revolution, the disruptor. Now we have,
yes, but also seen as the minor leagues in those days,
right?
Versus broadcast, yeah,
right,
like sort of AAA,
correct,
not the Premier League, Mo.
Yeah, no, the Premier League, yeah, or the Super League,
not the Super League, yeah. Well, that's by the way, so the Super League, that's where the world is going, by the way. So that's a good segue. The Super League is Netflix, Amazon, Disney, who am I forgetting?
Paramount Plus.
Well, they're going to have, so Paramount Plus, Discovery, like I think they're sort of, just a tier below that. Apple, Netflix, Disney.
Hulu.
Hulu's part of Disney, really, but that's where the world's going, to the Super League, and they're in the volume business. There's a insatiable appetite for content. There is nobody wants to watch commercials anymore. So so the whole thing has been turned on its head. In my day, I put the Real World on at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday night, and you showed up to watch it. And if you didn't, you missed it. I was in charge.
Yeah.
Right. Now, you're in charge. You decide what you're going to watch, when you're going to watch it, how you're going to watch it. And I just hope to make something that hopefully you'll watch. So, the entire dynamic has been turned on its head. And it's really changed dramatically. That being said, it's a great time for creators. It's a great time for content makers. There's an insatiable appetite of it. No shortage of platforms. That might level off a little bit at some point, but not in the foreseeable future. The world does not revolve as much around giant hits, like whether it's Thriller or Jaws or Star Wars or even Friends. It revolves around, everybody has their own individual hit on some platform somewhere. And it's like it's happened to music to a certain degree. It's fragmented quite a bit, right? So I'm not, will there ever be another Friends? I don't know. Will there ever be another Beatles, right?
So what do you think the next phase for the streaming wars is?
Look, it's going to get, I think they'll, I think, it's going to be it'll be content and technology driven. You'll see things like, interactivity, which they've been talking about for a long time. Sort of, they'll find ways to make it more interactive. AI, may play a role. Gaming, I'm not a gamer. It's not a generation I grew up in. I think sort of where gaming is content. And I think that's going to increasingly become a content choice for people in a lot of different ways. It manifests itself in a lot of different ways. Look, I certainly tell anybody who's entering this business or in this business or hoping to be in this business, it's a good time. Content remains, kind of king. Platforms are their queen. Content is not going away, and TV style content is never going away. I mean, that's the strength on which I think what we're seeing today has all been built, honestly.
And also that everybody's trying to get the creators. I mean, the creators are like the key thing now, because we've got user generated content, and there's so many places that the creators can put their content. So even like a Netflix, which is like the big sort of cheese.
So Netflix is. I was going to say Netflix is that's the place you want to be if you're a content creator these days.
But YouTube and
Instagram
TikTok,
the barriers
away.
The barriers have broken down, right? So the barriers to entry, you listen to Bruce Springsteen talk about, all he wanted was a record contract, right? Because that could get him into a recording studio, which he couldn't ever afford on his own, right? And so if you wanted to make a TV show, you had to come see an agent or somebody like me. And so I would, I'm a gatekeeper, and so now you can make music and TV shows and movies right out of your back pocket, right? And you can put it on a platform where people are actually going to see it. And by the way, it happens, right? We've seen this every day with influencers and people exploding off of these social media platforms, not having to go through a network, not having to go through a platform, not having to go through an agency. And, it's just it's a different world filled with opportunity, honestly.
Yeah, it's democratized everything. We talk about it with music all the time now, that, you're right. Bruce Springsteen, a poor kid from Jersey, not only could he not afford to go into a recording studio, he couldn't afford to press a record. If he had the money, and then how was he going to distribute that record and get it in the stores? And so you're right. Now it's instant.
When I talk to young people all the time, I tell you, I had to go to Emerson College to get my hands on a camera. Like handy cams didn't exist, and cell phones, like that wasn't a thing, right? So I had to go to college and get into college, and then go up and sign out a Rekka camera that weighed 300 pounds and lug it around Boston, and now I could do it like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a total game changer. It's incredible. Do you think with COVID, there is going to be a programming like a pressure for pipeline, because there's such a demand for content, and things have, although there was a lot of filming that went on during COVID, but production had to shut down in many cases. Do you see that?
No, I think I mean, look, I was working on the short-lived, ill-fated Quibi up until a few months ago. But what I knew was production was continuing and more than I thought, and it's really ramping up, and people are figuring this out and they're getting back out. There might be some hiccups here and there, but no, it's gonna, I mean, the bigger problem is, particularly in this town, is just finding space. There's so much production going on that, studios and facilities are at an absolute premium. And so, the biggest hindrance right now is, getting new facilities, completed so people can make more. So I mean, look, there'll be there's some COVID lag, but I don't think anywhere near as much as people thought.
Right.
Stuff is hey, Ted Lasso's coming back. They figure out how to shoot that.
And what are some of the shows, most recent shows, that you think are like just of absolute quality, that or or content that you've
I,
seen?
I loved Queen's Gambit like everybody did. I thought it was really, really well done. You could never have told me in a million years that I was going to be interested in a show about a chess prodigy. I love Ted. I love the aforementioned Ted Lasso, which I thought was just really funny and sweet, and and it was like a warm bath during COVID. I saw this show on Netflix that I really loved called Girihaji. It's a Japanese-British crime drama. It's only about 6 or 8 episodes. Not great, but really original. I'd give it like a B plus, but like I hadn't seen it before, and I really loved that. Trying to think of what. I watched this British program. I guess a mini series, short series called "It's a Sin," which is about the AIDS epidemic in Manchester, in the early '90s. Really, really very good. Enjoyed that quite a bit. Got to admit, haven't been watching much lately. It's baseball's back. I'm a baseball fan, and been watching a lot of basketball too. Not watching a lot of my Arsenal team. It's been a grim campaign. Another grim campaign for my Gunners.
I warned you about that because when you said you think you're going to back Arsenal as your team, I was like, that's a very bad idea. But
is it too late to back out?
Of course it is. You're welcome to come over to my side. We're on the rise.
There is no shortage of great things to watch. A lot of docs, a lot of music docs.
Yeah.
Enjoying a lot of those. Yeah, great music and more coming. I know so many people I know are working on really cool. And whether it's the Monkees or Willie Nelson or the Beach Boys or the Kinks, just so many friends are working on these docs that are coming. So excited for that.
Yeah, one last question before we go, because we only have a little bit of time left.
Sure.
The binge watching, which is kind of a new phenomena. Just talk a little bit about that and how that really changed everything. Because as we talked earlier, we used to wait every week for our show to happen.
Well, yeah, I mean that was the, and there's still, some people are still trying to do that. But the binge thing is here to stay, and we live in an on-demand world. And, certainly I grew up differently. You grew up a little differently. But let me tell you, our kids, and certainly your kids, they want what they want right now. And by the way, and once I get it, don't tell me to stop. Because, why can't I just keep going? And that's where we are. And so that's never going away. And there's something fun about it. Although there's something I also do, still appreciate about like seeing like that great episode of a series on HBO and thinking about it all week and then waiting for it to come back again. But I go back and forth. It depends what mood I'm in. Sometimes I just like to just keep going to rip through them. Then you wake up and it's 4 a.m.
Right.
So what are you going to do? But binging is here to stay.
Yeah, no, it definitely is here.
Here's the thing, and all these things, you know this about the culture. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. The one time I looked that they tried to do that was Prohibition, and we know how that went. And once the genie's out of the bottle, it just the line just keeps going forward, and you move with it, or get sucked up in the wake.
Yeah, absolutely. Doug, thank you so much. This has been a really amazing,
a lot of fun.
Instagram Live. Yeah, and just so people know, we are turning all our Instagram Lives into podcasts, and we're launching this Wednesday. And Doug will turn yours into one as well, so that'll be coming out in the next few weeks. But thank you everyone for joining. Thank you once again, Doug. It's a pleasure. It's just been a pleasure seeing your career and hearing about it. And I hope everyone's safe and have a great weekend. Take care.
Same here. We'll catch up soon.
I look forward to it in person. Bye-bye.